Hey guys, welcome back to Tiny Fibre Studio. This is episode 4 of a podcast about knitting, spinning, and specifically me attempting to become a more purposeful spinner by only knitting with my own hand spun in 2017. Thank you very much if you are a return viewer. I really appreciate you coming back. And if this is your first time discovering this podcast, then welcome. If you'd like a little bit more information about the Handspun 17 project, then I would suggest that you go back to episode 1 and have a little look there because that explains the entire process. I just want to say a really massive thank you to Chrissy from the Snappy Stitches podcast because she mentioned Tiny Fibre Studio in her last podcast. And I know that a lot of people have found out about the podcast and the Handspun 17 project from Chrissy. So thank you so much, Chrissy. I really appreciate that. I woke up and there were like 30 new subscribers and it's just carried on going. So I really appreciate that. In this episode, I have a finished object to show you, which I wasn't expecting to have, but I do. I also have a confession to make, which I hope will mean that you won't hate me forever, but hopefully once I explain the confession, then you might still come back and watch other episodes of the podcast. And I also have, as the observant amongst you may have noticed, a little bit of an update when it comes to a work in progress. And in relation to that, I have a tool that I'm going to talk a little bit about a little bit later on. So we'll start with the finished object, and the finished object is this. Obviously, a hot water bottle cover. I use a hot water bottle every night because I get restless leg syndrome, which is seriously annoying if you've never had it, but a hot water bottle seems to help. So I use it every night, summer and winter. So a hot water bottle cover is pretty important to me. And I actually made it out of 2 skeins of yarn that I've shown you in a previous episode where I was talking about my very first handspun yarns. So these are actually part of the first 2 skeins that I ever spun on a spinning wheel. I showed you them, they were pretty inconsistent. You really can't tell. Not that it would matter because it's not like I sit and watch my hot water bottle for entertainment or anything like that. It's, it's basically down by my feet, and so I don't really need to see something that's beautifully consistent. It just needs to be practical. I striped them up. When I look at what's left, I probably could have got an entire hot water bottle out of 1 skein, but I quite like the idea of still having 2 skeins or partial 2 skeins available to show people as an example of improving consistency. The pattern that I used was from an Australian website called Home Life. It was a very simple pattern. I did adjust it slightly just to get it to my gauge, which I think meant casting on about 8 more stitches, which worked out totally fine. The only thing that was a problem was I forgot to allow for the eyelets to be different. So you probably won't be able to see, but there's actually an extra eyelet here that isn't getting used because I forgot to account for the extra eyelets because of the extra stitches. Again, I really don't care, that's not important to me. But this was a really quick project, it was finished in a day, and it means that I have actually used some of my very first handspun, which is very cool. Definitely the thing that I've learned from this is knit with your handspun, regardless of how inconsistent you think it might be. In actual fact, in the finished object, doesn't really make any difference. I don't think anybody would bat an eyelid if I'd made a sweater out of it. Not that there's a sweater quantity. So yeah, knit with your handspun, people. It's important. Now onto a very serious confession, because I lied to you guys last week and I'm really sorry for that. I'm very ashamed of myself, but I told you that there wouldn't be very many acquisitions, or as I call them, shiny new things in this podcast, and it turns out I totally lied. I'm very, very sorry, but this week there are quite a few shiny new things to talk about. One of them I'd already ordered, the rest kind of just came along out of thin air. So, on with the first one. First thing was, I'd already mentioned that I had placed an order with Akerworks, and my Akerworks order arrived last Saturday. I'm recording this on a Saturday, so last Saturday I did my little trip to the sorting office to go and pick up this parcel, and I have a couple of really awesome things from Akerworks. The main reason for placing the order was that they needed to send me some peaceful pliers, which I'll show you a little bit later on when I talk about the Akerworks Lazy Kate, but it's essentially an extra part for the Lazy Kate that they had to send me. So I figured, well, you know, they're sending me stuff anyway, I may as well just buy some other stuff and they can send it all at the same time. It's completely logical, right? So one of the things that I got was something I should have got to start with, and I didn't, and I regretted it, which is one of the little hedgy flyer threaders. These things are so cute. They have a very practical, very long flyer threader on them, which is slightly crimped at the end, so that you can holds the yarn really well as you're pulling it through the orifice. And the hedgie itself is super cute, and it has little wheels that turn around for no practical use whatsoever, but I love it. I love that detail. And it's also kind of weird because you sort of sit there thinking, how did they actually do that? I think Aiden is a magician. I think that's how they did it. But hedgie is very cute, so we like hedgie. And I also got a couple of parts of the modular spindle system. I've been intrigued about this for a little while, and a lot of the spindles that I have are really beautiful wooden ones, which I always get a little bit nervous about taking out of the house. I would be concerned about damaging them, because I go for really small spindles, like 15, 16 grams, like tiny, tiny little things. And I'm a little bit concerned about breaking the shaft on them or something like that. So I figured that having something that was perhaps a little bit more sturdy might be a good option. So this is what I got. The way that the modular spindle system works is you have shafts in different lengths, and then you have whirls in different sizes and therefore different weights. So what I got was the Trillium with an 8-inch shaft, and the way they work is they just pop onto the top and they lock in exactly the same way as the Akerworks bobbins do. So you just push it on, give it a twist, and then that's secure. The cool thing is that you can actually move the hub up and down the shaft. So you can have a top whirl, a bottom whirl, a middle whirl if you really wanted. So that was the first combination. The Trillium, by the way, is in berry blue, which I hadn't seen before. Either that or it just escaped my radar when I was ordering my bobbins. But that's my first combination. My second one I have in a little plastic container here. In case you're interested, in case anybody needs to know this, this is a Lock and Lock 1.6 litre rectangular container, and it fits both the Trillium and my other one, the Geranium, really well. They actually come with little protective caps to fit over the hook, which is very cool, and I use those if I'm transporting them around so the hook doesn't accidentally get bent. So that is a small Geranium, and they spin really nicely, especially the Geranium. Spins really, really beautifully. My actual drop spindle spinning, on the other hand, is a little bit rusty. I need to work on it, and I particularly need to work on it because they're heavier than the ones that I would normally try and get. So consequently the yarn's going to be thicker, and I need to get used to drafting a thicker yarn. Just so that you can see, I'm going to try to draft so that you can actually see this. Let me just wrap my fibre around my wrist or something for a minute. Like I say, my spinning is so rusty. So they spin for a really nice long time, and I really like them. I think I will probably do a proper review of this at some point. There's one other really cool thing about this modular spindle system, which is that all of the Akerworks bobbins can be used on the hub for the modular spindle system. Which means that if I use the Trillium as an example, you can just take that off so that you just have the shaft, and you can actually fix on the end of one of the bobbins. So you could actually take the end off one of these bobbins, obviously not while it's full, and you could use that as a whirl. So within my existing collection, I've already got quite a few different whirls that I could use with this system. And that's one of the things that I really love about Akerworks, is the way that they make their entire kind of ecosystem of products work together. So that was my Akerworks order, and that was the first of my shiny new things this week. The second shiny new thing is some higher stuff. Because I'm doing a lot of swatching at the moment, I'm kind of becoming really aware of the fact that I didn't have all of the higher needles. I had all of the small set, all of the large set, plus some of the other needle sizes that don't come in the small set, or didn't when I bought it. So I decided to get the full set, which really just meant buying the sock needle sizes. At the same time, I did get a needle gauge because I wanted to have a needle gauge just in the cases with the hires. The really weird thing about this is, and it's fine for my purposes, so I don't really care about this, but it's 3.5 inches. And I don't really know why, given that every swatch that you knit as standard is 4 inches. Would it have killed them to make it half an inch longer? I think not. Something to be aware of if you're considering buying one. Just keep in mind that it doesn't go up to 4 inches. But for my purposes, just having a really handy gauge in the case with the needles, just for the ones where the sizing's rubbed off, I'm totally fine with that. So that was one thing. I also got a spare set of 4.5mm needles because I actually dented one set. I sat down while I was knitting, I think, my slippers last year, and as I sat down, the leg of the chair caught the needles and put a little dent in them. I've successfully knitted a whole load of stuff with the dent, but my kind of slight OCD meant that I needed to get the extra needles. So that was a pair of 4.5s, and all of these are higher stainless steel sharps. I really like the sharp tips, the taper, everything about them suits my knitting style really well, so they are my preference. So that was the 4.5mm tips, and then I also got all of the sock sizes, so the 2, 2.25 and 2.5, and the miniature sock cables. So that was my higher order, so that completes my full set of stainless steel sharp needles. They're all 5-inch tips, by the way. The way that I knit, I find it really odd if there isn't needle kind of underneath my hands, and I sometimes find with 4mm tips kind of ends up being in an odd place in my hand. I've also been thinking for quite some time about filling in the gaps in my Ply magazine collection. I had a subscription for the first 2 years, and then I let it lapse last year just because when I looked at some of the upcoming issues, I didn't think that I would get a lot out of them. But I've been debating going back and filling in the gaps from that whole year's worth of subscription. And I did exactly that. I had a bit of a quandary about a couple of issues that I'll come on to as we go through them. So this is the little stack that I went and collected this morning from the sourcing office. So it's 5 issues of Ply magazine, starting from winter 2015 with the singles edition. This was one of the ones that I had a bit of a quandary about. This was the cotton issue. I don't really spin a lot of cotton, but I'll come on to the reasons why I ordered that and one of the other issues in a moment. So there's cotton. Summer 2016 was bulky. Autumn 2016 was boucle. And then winter 2016 was plying. So I had some debates over whether or not I really needed a couple of those issues. In particular, boucle. The chances of me ever actually voluntarily wanting to spin boucle are relatively slim, apart from just experimentation. It's not really something that I would knit with a huge amount, but then in the back of my mind there's always the thing about, what if I end up doing the Certificate of Achievement in Spinning? One of the yarns that they make you produce is boucle. So in that situation, it would be really useful. So I thought about it long and hard, and I thought, yeah, you know what, I'll just do it so that I have a complete collection of Ply. If you haven't come across Ply magazine before, I'll just give you a little bit of a roundup of the idea behind it. The idea is essentially that each issue has a different subject, and it kind of builds up into this huge encyclopedia of all different topics. For each issue, they request submissions. Doesn't have to be from famous spinning people, it can be from anybody, but submissions around a particular topic. And the idea is that they're gathering together all of the best information that they can from contemporary spinners about that particular issue. I always find something useful in Ply, even if the issue topic doesn't particularly interest me. There's always something interesting that I learn in that magazine. And they're just a really, really useful resource that I return back to any time that I'm doing something that's relevant to one of the issues. For example, I have 3 bobbins there, which means that I'm going to be plying those pretty soon. So this issue, the plying issue, is definitely going to be something that I'm going to be referring to. I've already had a little flick through, and there's a great article around, I think it's called Plying by Numbers. Let me just find it so that I can refer to it. Yeah, Plying by Numbers. What's really interesting about this is they've taken the numeric techniques that are taught by various different teachers, or have historically been taught by various different teachers, and they've actually done experiments with it. So they do experiments with Mabel Ross's idea of doing 2/3 the amount of twist. They've also done plying at half the amount of twist in the single, and plying with a U, where some teachers recommend making sure that the ply forms a loop, forms like a U before it goes through the orifice. So they've tried all of those techniques out, and they show you the photos from the experiments and explain the results. The first photo in the article is how they looked before they were washed and finished. Second photo is how they hang once they've been finished, and there's a detail shot as well, so you can really tell all of the details of it. That's definitely going to be an article that I'm going to be referring to when I come to plying my cowl spin. So 5 issues of Ply magazine. I definitely have some reading on my hands to get through this lot, but I'm definitely really glad that I have a complete collection of Ply magazines, because the chances are when you actually want to spin boucle, for example, you won't have that issue and you'll find it really difficult to get hold of it. So that's pretty much the reason why I got that issue. So that's it for new and shiny things for this week. There will be something else hopefully next week to talk about. So now on to works in progress. Ta-da! I mentioned it earlier, but I have 3 finished singles to ply. Yay! Looking at them, I'm pretty happy. I'm pretty confident that they're all relatively consistent. And I love looking at the tops of these bobbins, because you can kind of see right down inside them and see how all the yarn's sitting. It's really cute. So I figured that now might be a good time to talk about the Lazy Kate from Akerworks, because I'm going to be using it this afternoon to start plying those 3 bobbins together. I'll first of all just explain my needs when it came to a Lazy Kate. First thing was that, as I discussed in episode 1, I try to have things that take up as little space as possible. So I knew that I definitely wanted a folding Lazy Kate, or something that was a travel size, because my previous Lazy Kate is this one. It's the Ashford tensioned Lazy Kate, and it's not really that easy to store. I think originally the shafts came out, but I think it's been used so much now that they're pretty much stuck in. So that's quite an annoying shape to try and store, and it basically takes up that much space. Kind of annoying, wanted to get away from that. I looked at a few other options, but one of the things that I was quite conscious of was that I didn't want to feel like I was compromising. So I didn't want the Lazy Kate to feel like it was a lesser product just because it was a small size. And there were a few other options that I looked at. I looked at the different reviews and they were kind of mixed. There were a few people who just didn't like them, didn't get on with them as much. So when I heard that Aidan at Akerworks was doing a Lazy Kate, I thought, okay, let's have a little look at this. So I went onto the Ravelry group, and in there's a thread about the Lazy Kate, and I looked at what all the testers of the product were saying. Everybody was really liking it, and there were a lot of features that they mentioned which I thought were really, really cool. So this was what I ended up with, and I love it. When I saw the price, there was a little bit of a sharp intake of breath, it has to be said. They are $134 at the moment, or $146 for the walnut version. When they first launched it, it only came in cherry, which was fine because I have a cherry mini spinner and I wanted it to match that. But they now do it in cherry, maple and walnut. That pricing, although it was a bit of a sharp intake of breath, wasn't actually and isn't actually that bad. If you look at things like the Major Craft Lazy Kate, that's a comparable price. So they can get absurdly expensive even if they don't do anything particularly kind of fancy or different. So what's really, really cool with the Akerworks Lazy Kate, I think, is first of all, the mechanism is just beautiful. All you do is grab one of the shafts, pull it up, and this little section raises up automatically, and you just push it down to lock it in place. It also comes with these things called tensi tamers, which allow you to tension your Lazy Kate without any kind of wires or bits of fishing line or any of that stuff. So you just take a Teague tamer out of their little storage slot, pop it onto the end of the shaft so that it's resting against the bobbin, and then just by pressing it further down or taking it further off, you can apply tension to the end of the bobbin, which means that your bobbin doesn't overspin when you're plying. The other thing that's really cool with the Teague tamers is that you can also use them for spindle shafts. So if you have the modular spindle system, or I'm sure any other spindle would work pretty well on here as well, you can just pop up whichever two shafts you need. You'd put Teague tamers on each one, and then you can actually have the shaft of the spindle going across here, and you can ply straight off the shaft of the spindle. Somebody in their forums discovered that, and I thought that was genius. Everything stores away really nicely, so the Teague tamers fit really nicely back into the little slots that are made for them in the Lazy Kate itself. And when you finish with the shafts, you just press the end of this section, fold it down, and away you go. Really simple, but really, really beautifully made. Lots of attention to detail. One of the things that I really like is the fact that even though it's a travel Kate, you have space for 4 bobbins on it. And you've seen the size of the Akerworks Handsome Woolly Winder bobbins. They're pretty huge, and you can fit 4 of those on very comfortably. The other thing about having 4 shafts available is if you're using 3 of them, you can use the 4th one for the Teague tamer and actually feed the yarn through the Teague tamer, which I find really useful if I'm doing a 3-ply or less. So that's a really nice feature. Probably the only thing that I don't particularly like is how tight the slipcase is that comes with it, unless they've changed it since I got mine. It's definitely quite close fitting, and you kind of want that so it doesn't just fall off, but at the same time it's quite difficult to get it on and off. So I don't really have a problem getting it in and out of the case. It just feels like it's pretty tight fit. Most of the time, to be honest, unless I'm actually taking it out and about, I don't bother putting it in the slipcase. It just stays out as it is. I have seen though that some people have found a neoprene keyboard case that fits it and fits it really nicely. So I might have to have a little look into those. Other than that, I really like my Akerworks Lazy Kate, and it will be seeing a lot of action in the next day or two because I'm going to get on to plying that 450, 470 grams of Polworth, Merino and Zwobbles mix that is hopefully going to turn into a cowl. One really exciting bit of news last week was that Nonoko and its sister company Spin Jones reopened on last Friday. So that was really cool because Nonoko is one of my favourite fibre prep companies. I think they do some beautiful bats. Their use of colour is really, really nice, and their actual fibre prep is really well done. I really love their stuff. They started in Wales, and unfortunately one of them moved far enough away that they didn't feel like they could continue the business together. So they split Nonoko into 2 parts. So Nonoko still exists, but there's also now Spin Jones as well. I was having a little bit of a browse on their website, and I think it was on Nonoko's Etsy store. They had sample boxes, which are 10 grams of 20 different samples from their top. And it got me thinking that it would be kind of interesting to do a sample along with all of you beautiful viewers out there. So the idea would be that we would set a particular method of sampling for that week. So worsted, woolen, 2-ply, 3-ply, cabled yarn, I might even get really evil and do boucle for 1 week. And then the caveat is you have to knit with that yarn. You have to actually sample it through to whatever you're going to use it for. So if you knit, you'd have to knit a swatch. If you weave, you'd have to weave a swatch, and so on. Let me know what you think. It's probably a project that I will do anyway at some point, but I would love to do something that the whole community can get involved with. So let me know what you think, and any sort of suggestions that you might have would be very much appreciated. I think that's almost it for this episode of Tiny Fibre Studio, apart from the fact that I need to tell you about what I'm wearing so that you can hunt down the patterns should you wish. So the first thing is my shawl, which is a very, very popular pattern. It's Exploration Station by Stephen West. It's made in Blacker Yarns Tamar 4-ply. This was the second Exploration Station that I made, and I completely love it. The only modification that I made to the pattern was just doing a couple of extra rows on the bottom. So one in the dark grey and one in the green. And I really think that little bit really makes it, you know, it really anchors that edge nicely. I love this shawl. I barely take it off. It's pretty much the one shawl that I wear now. I also really love the yarn. It's a really kind of rustic yarn, and I mean that in a really nice way. It's very nice and soft. It's definitely next to the skin soft, but it's also been very hard wearing. It's developed a little bit of a halo, but that's normal. It contains a lot of long wools, so that's kind of expected for that type of yarn. But it really hasn't shown that much in the way of pilling or any of that kind of stuff. So Blacker Yarns, Tamar 4-ply, Exploration Station, I love it. What I have underneath is the Gathered Pullover, which is one of the first sweaters that I ever knitted. And apart from the length of it, I really wouldn't change a lot. The length at the moment pretty much comes up to the waistband of my jeans. I would probably take it a little bit further. But apart from that, I really wouldn't change a lot, to be honest. I really love the cable and the way the cable kind of pulls the waist in and does all the shaping. So that is a very successful project, and I love it very, very much. That's it for Tiny Fibre Studio for this week. By next week, I'm hoping that I should have my cowl spin completely finished, and hopefully actually be working on the cowl, knitting it. If you'd like to keep up to speed with what's going on in between now and then, you can follow me on Instagram. I'm Tiny Fibre Studio on there. Or on Ravelry, I am Becks, and there is also a Tiny Fibre Studio group on Ravelry as well. Or the easiest option is to leave a comment just down here in the YouTube channel so that I can try and respond to everybody's requests. Incidentally, if you have requested any particular tutorial topic or asked me to talk about anything specific, I am keeping a list of all of those things for future episodes. It may be that I end up doing some quick tutorials alongside the weekly podcast. We'll see how that goes, but I am keeping a list of all of your suggestions, so thank you very much for those. Keep them coming. Also, let me know how you feel about the idea of doing a sample along. So until I see you again, thanks very much for watching, and I'll see you again soon.